All right, what's going on, guys? Today we are going to jump right into it. I hope everyone enjoyed their holidays. If you took a holiday or took a break or anything, hope you enjoyed it. I am back to work. In fact, I just got home from work and I have not had dinner yet, so I'm going to jump through this stuff as quickly as possible because I need to get back in the habit of reading that I took a break from while I was on break. You can see Winnie in the background back there. Hopefully she behaves herself and we don't have any interruptions, because today we are tackling an important topic, a topical topic. We're taking a look at The Invisible Minority, a literature review of LGBTQ plus persons in music education. Gonna take a look at the abstract here, see if you're interested in it. If you are, you can stick around. Topics of inclusivity and diversity in music education have drawn increased attention to how different minority groups experience music education. Unlike concerns surrounding most gender and race issues, lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer, and other sexual and/or gender minority (LGBTQ+ students and teachers are not always as visibly identifiable as other minority groups and therefore can easily be overlooked. In this literature review, I examined research specific to the LGBTQ+ community, representing an invisible minority group of music classrooms with the aim to raise awareness of the individual obstacles that LGBTQ+ music teachers and students face, so that further discussions engaging music educators might have a stronger knowledge base. Findings suggests that some LGBTQ music educators struggle to fully embrace their identity, often having to negotiate professional and personal personalities out of fear or uncertainty. Although music classrooms are often considered safe spaces for LGBTQ+ students, the music curriculum should be more inclusive. This is definitely something that I think we all need to learn more about. So not only am I studying literature reviews right now so I can write my own, but as a music educator myself, this is a good thing to be reading more about. So, introduction. I don't think we want words conflicting with my words. Let's give that a try. I do have monitors in my ears now, or at least earbuds, so that I can tell if the music is, not great, or if my microphone is echoing like it was the other day before break. So I apologize for all that. Hopefully my technical difficulties have ironed themselves out. Let's get started. Introduction. As a gay music educator, I am humbled to witness the increased presence of out LGBTQ+ students and educators within school music communities. Having experienced the struggle of coming out for the first time in high school, I appreciate the courage and self-awareness demonstrated by many young music students at various adjudicated events, festivals, and especially in my own classroom. Sexual orientation and gender identity are essential components of an individual's personhood and identity development. Researchers have found that performing arts classes often attract LGBTQ+ students. Unfortunately, educational climates continue to serve as adverse or neglectful communities for many LGBTQ+ persons. Many terms, acronyms, and identifiers are commonly used and accepted when discussing matters of LGBTQ+ research. Because of the topic's sensitive nature and the importance of identity recognition, it is necessary to recognize and define some of these terms before proceeding. First, the acronym LGBTQ+ is an expansion of the gay, lesbian, bisexual, GLB, abbreviation initially used in the late 1980s and early 1990s. It was first expanded to LGBT to include the now outdated term of transsexual, which is often replaced with transgender as a more commonly preferred term representing the vastly diverse gender spectrum. The acronym has since been lengthened to include a broader and more inclusive spectrum of both sexual and gender non-heteronormative identifiers: lesbian, gay, bisexual, transsexual, transgender, queer, questioning, intersex, ally, asexual, and pansexual. The list has even grown to include identifiers such as two-spirit and androgynous. Androgynous. Yeah, I was right. Because of the continually expanding list of letters, LGBTQ+ has become widely accepted as the all-encompassing acronym for the sexual and genderqueer community. Bergonzi. Okay, my eyes were first opened to this. I read an article, I think his first name is Lou Bergonzi, where he was discussing what, not necessarily suggesting any changes needed to be made, but he was saying that there are things that heteronormative people take for granted that they should know that non-heteronormative people are a little bit more uncomfortable with. For example, just a teacher putting a picture on their desk of them and their spouse. As a straight white person, it's very, very normal and accepted for me to have a picture of myself and my wife sitting on my desk, and nobody would question it. But if I were not a straight person, maybe that would be less. I'd be less comfortable doing that. I would worry about what people think when they saw it. Maybe I don't want to share that part of my life. So it was an eye-opening article. If these things interest you, I recommend taking a look at Bergonzi's work. I think Lou, don't quote me on that, but Bergonzi, take a look at his work. It was really eye-opening. It was a nice article that he wrote. Queer is another critical term to acknowledge. Queer is another critical term to acknowledge because of its long history of derogatory use. Although some might be apprehensive about using the word queer, many members of the LGBTQ+ community have come to embrace the term as a rejection of normative sexualities and genders, a reclaiming of the term of their identities, and a feeling of self-empowerment. Though it is still nascent? I've never heard that word. I don't know what that means. Can I look? Look up. Nascent. Just coming into existence and beginning to display. Oh yeah, I figured that. How do you say it? Nascent? Where's the accent go? Nay, okay. Nascent? Nascent. Okay. Though it is still a nascent field of research, there has been increased attention placed on LGBTQ+ matters in music education. More articles have been written and published in prominent journals, perhaps due to the LGBTQ Studies and Music Education Symposia initiated in May of 2010 at the University of Illinois, with the launching of its founding conference, Establishing Identity. Subsequent conference meetings took place in 2012 and 2016, with a fourth symposium planned to be held virtually in 2021. As a new and growing area of research, the LGBTQ Studies and Music Education Symposia aspires to encourage, promote, and disseminate discourse regarding the intersection of LGBT issues and music education. The symposium seeks to provide energy to the discussion of how LGBT issues operate within music education in terms of research, curriculum, teacher preparation, and the musical lives and careers of LGBT music students and teachers. Papers, research summaries, and abstracts from presentations at all conferences can be found in the Bulletin of the Council for Research in Music Education, issue number 188, 199, and 207 to 208. The topics of approach. The topics of inclusivity and diversity in music education have drawn increased attention to how different minority groups experience music education. In this literature review, I examine works specific to the LGBTQ+ community, representing the invisible minority group in music classrooms. Unlike concerns surrounding most gender and race issues, LGBTQ+ students and teachers are not always as visibly identifiable as other minority groups, and therefore can be easily overlooked. The purpose of this literature review was to examine current LGBTQ+ studies in the field of music education with the aim to raise awareness of the unique experiences that LGBTQ+ music teachers and students confront. Detailed accounts of selected literature are shared in this review so that further discussions among music educators, teacher educators, and pre-service teachers might have a stronger knowledge base. The literature presented in this literature review highlights specific experiences of music educators and music students identified as LGBTQ+ individuals, with a dedicated section addressing the unique experiences of transgender individuals. This review concludes with items for further research, or further reflection, and suggestions for future research. The literature referenced throughout this review represents an increasingly expanding area of research in music education. Although most of the work cited are scholarly articles published in prominent research journals, books, dissertations, and a master's thesis, have all been included. These sources were obtained primarily through database searches using keywords including queer, LGBTQ, gay, transgender, and music education. Also, by referencing sources cited throughout the literature review, I was able to cross-reference my list of sources so that a comprehensive review of literature could be shared. The most recent dissertation was especially useful in providing the most up-to-date and pertinent literature available. I did not include sources geared towards music therapy or those that were not explicitly discussing the inclusion of LGBTQ+ persons in music education in this review. Here we have words again. Words again. I'll have to go through and pick out the ones with words so I don't have to keep stopping. The educator's experience. Many LGBTQ+ educators find themselves in situations where they feel a need to negotiate their own identity to fit into what many would consider heteronormative communities. For some LGBTQ+ educators, it is not uncommon to feel pressure when negotiating personal identities as early as the student teaching experience. Paparo and Sweet presented an intrinsic case study of two of their respective students preparing for pre-service teaching experiences. They chose this design because of their interest in the students' particular experiences rather than investigating general problems. Participants included one 23-year-old gay male, Brett, and a 23-year-old lesbian, Nicole, preparing for pre-service teaching in music education. As part of the study, the researchers conducted 3 interviews over the participants' 16-week internship. The meetings were 60 to 90 minutes long and occurred just before student teaching, again in the middle of the semester, and once more on completion. Brett and Nicole also provided weekly journal entries, providing data on their lived experiences in and out of the classrooms. Both Brett and Nicole came out early in high school and were eager to discover how they might navigate the intersection of their personal and professional identities. However, both Brett and Nicole were discouraged by experiences that led them to feel a need to negotiate their identities in the classroom, including pressure from cooperating teachers. Similar themes of identity negotiation are revealed in 10 gay and lesbian band directors' lived experiences throughout different stages of their careers. In this qualitative study, the phenomenological approach was used, I always have trouble saying that word, was used by engaging participants in one-on-one interviews optional journaling, and a focus group interview. The collected data were synthesized and organized into two general categories: negotiating disclosures and negotiating success. Like Paparo and Sweet, Taylor found that most participants chose to disclose their sexual orientation to immediate colleagues, i.e. other band directors, but were much more guarded around students and students' parents. Participants perceived that openness with colleagues had enriched working relationships, but were concerned that disclosure with students and students' parents could have negative ramifications. Fear was a primary factor in both studies, notably among the male educators who were, quote, concerned that any misperceptions might lead to unfounded assumptions of child abuse, or being perceived as a deviant and accused of inappropriate behavior with students, end quote. Fear reoccurs as a principal motivator for music educators who feel a need to negotiate their personal and professional identities. This is illustrated in a study that examined the lives of experiences of two gay male choir directors, which inspected motivations for being closeted in the workplace but out in other areas of their lives. McBride also depicted what it meant for educators to be implicitly or explicitly out and the choices that have to be considered daily by these marginalized teachers. In this account, the author has pointed to the viable threat to employment in many communities throughout the country. This act of discrimination is a significant motivator for many LGBTQ+ educators to carefully consider whether or to what extent they could be comfortably out in the workplace. Similar fears of discrimination have been uncovered in other studies. The student's experience. Take a break here, get a drink, wet my whistle. Students' experience. Since 1990, the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network has served, my goodness, how am I going to say that? GLSEN? Jilson? I'm going to call it Jilson. Hi, Night Car Sky. Thanks for chatting. Thanks for being here. Night Karski? I'm so good with names, as you probably figured out. Have I read any books about China? I have read some research studies that were conducted in China. Nothing specifically is popping to mind right now. I tend to read research just in the United States, since that's where I'm based. This is just all scholarly research, no fiction. Since 1999, oh wait, I skipped a bunch of stuff. I'm going to call it Jilson. The Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network has served as a national organization dedicated to providing safe learning environments for all students, delivering educators with resources and research concerning sexual orientation and sexual identity in school communities and climates. Since 1999, Jolson has produced biennial reports communicating data collected to document the unique challenges of LGBTQ+ students in schools. In its most recent report, the 2019 Jolson National School Climate Survey, researchers at the organization examined concerns such as hostile school climate, student coping strategies, supportive school resources, and impacts of hostile school climates. After 2 decades of conducting such surveys, researchers can examine patterns of change over time. The Jolson National School Climate Survey provided valuable data reflecting current trends in the United States schools including information concerning LGBTQ+ students' participation in extracurricular activities. The data collected were limited to concerns primarily concerning restricted LGBTQ+ students' involvement in athletic activities. There were scarcely any mention of the arts in the 2019 survey. And this is an excerpt from that survey. LGBTQ students in our survey also reported discriminatory experiences with regard to school athletics. Approximately 1/10 of the students indicated that school staff or coaches had prevented or discouraged them from playing sports because they were LGBTQ. LGBTQ students may also be indirectly discouraged from participating in sports if they are unable to use the locker rooms aligned with their gender identity. For example, transgender or non-binary students may be required to use the locker room of their assigned sex, and other LGBTQ students may be prevented from using gendered locker rooms based on their same-sex attraction, such as staff preventing a lesbian girl from using the girls' locker room because she's a lesbian. We found that 27.2% of LGBTQ students were prevented from using locker rooms aligned with their gender identity. Furthermore, we found that LGBTQ students who experienced this locker room discrimination were less likely to participate in school sports and were more likely to avoid gym class, sports, fields, and locker rooms at school. Well, duh. The 2013 Juleson National School Climate Survey was the last edition to report LGBTQ+ students' extracurricular participation levels. In this survey, band, orchestra, and choir were listed as the top-rated group of involvement, and nearly half of the respondents, 47.9%, enrolled in school music ensembles. There is a lack of research concerning this community in the field of music education. Despite the challenges and inequalities many LGBTQ+ students continue to face, I did not find literature concerning middle and high school aged students. Instead, most published research focused on the attitudes, experiences, and reflections of college music students. One of the earliest and most cited works in this area of study, Nothing Better or Worse Than Being Black, Gay, and in Band. One of the earliest and most cited works in this area of study. That's not a sentence. It's like the second time this has happened. As suggested by the title, Carter described the values and trepidations experienced by four gay... My mind's all over the place, I apologize. Experienced by four gay black students participating in historically black college marching bands. Data for this study included 10 60 to 90-minute interviews, as well as a written information from each participant. Autobiographical writings were provided at the onset of the study and described family and friends, formative music experiences, and life experiences as a gay man. Carter's findings resulted in several common areas of concern, including negotiating opposing identities, the strong black male versus the gay black male, facing deficiencies in rejection, coming out and remaining discreet, and concerns of passing or being presumed as heterosexual. Although participants considered band to be a friendly and welcoming community, it was not necessarily thought of as a place to be openly queer. Because of this, most participants embraced an ever-evolving and renegotiating African American identity. The 2019 Juleson Report National School Climate Survey indicated that harassment, assault, discrimination, and victimization were ongoing problems in middle schools and high schools nationwide, with 86.3% of students reporting harassment or assault based on personal characteristics, including sexual orientation, gender expression, gender, actual or perceived religion, actual or perceived race and ethnicity, and actual or perceived disability. 86.3%. A related study included features of university enrollments supporting LGBTQ+ music and arts students' well-being. The author adopted Sigelman's model of well-being, measuring elements of PERMA, positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishments, as interpreted from data secured from the 2013 to 2015 College Student Report by the National Survey of Student Engagement. Because researchers were not granted access to the entire College Student Report dataset, survey responses only included students who identified as music majors, music or art education majors, or LGBTQ+. In general, findings indicated that all music and art students tend to, quote, perceive better support for their well-being by their institutions' environments than their non-music/art LGBTQ peers. The Transgender Experience. Gender is another critical component when considering experiences of the LGBTQ+ community in the music classroom. In particular, diverse gender identities that are non-conforming to the heteronormative tradition. Is our music still good? It got really quiet and I couldn't hear it. All right, back to work. An unfortunate consequence of being part of such a broad community as the LGBTQ+ family is the misconceived assumption that experiences of sexual orientation minorities and gender identity minorities are equivalent. To discuss issues faced by the LGBTQ+ community in the field of music education without examining specific experiences of transgender individuals would be negligent. Although the number of published studies and articles that are being published, that's redundant, do account for lesbian and gay individuals' experiences in music education, literature specific to the transgender community remains concerningly sparse. Oh, I've seen this name before too. Bartolome? Let's go with Bartolome. Responded to this need in her narrative account of a transgender woman, male to female, who she worked with and observed for 3 years. The researchers sought to contribute to a scant area of research by detailing a transgender music educator's experience during her senior year of pre-service preparation and throughout the first 2 years of her professional career. Through 10 90-minute interviews, reflective writings, and classroom observations, Bartolome worked collaboratively with her participant, Melanie, to develop a study that would appropriately represent her experiences as a transgender music educator. The structure of this narrative reflected critical periods of Melanie's journey, which aligned with the different names that were used throughout her identity development: childhood and adolescence, Matthew; first 3 years of college, Mel; senior year of college, Melanie; and first 2 years of teaching, Miss Stanford. Topics addressed throughout the study included concerns with passing, issues with legal name changes, employment discrimination, and openly identifying as transgender in the workplace. I guess this song doesn't have words, but I don't think I like it. Oh. That counts. Nichols completed A comparable narrative account sharing the life story of a transgender individual, Rye? Let's go with Rye, whose journey began in 6th grade. In this account, the author used critical storytelling to share Rye's unique journey, alternating between the participants' masculine identifiers, Ryan, and their current feminine name and pronouns. Oscillating between the bounded dualistic distinction of gendered language creates momentary disorientation in the textual flow that reminds the reader of the central tension of the story. This representation was a decision made by Rye to maintain control of how her story was to be presented. The gathering of information for this study was similar to that of Bartolome and her participant Melanie. In-depth interviews were conducted in a narrator-listener model, and reflective writings in the form of poetry and music were shared. This literature is critical because it portrays the uniquely traumatic, dangerous, and bravely lived experiences of a gender-variant individual navigating their way through life at an early age. Rye's story illustrates victimization and bullying in schools, a struggle with depression, and physical and mental abuse. A crucial centerpiece of this lived experience is the critically positive role music and music communities played in Rye's personal struggle to align her physical self, her social presentation of gender, and her sexual orientation while negotiating a school environment unprepared for her presence. Wow. Although research addressing transgender students and educators' distinct challenges is still developing, literature featuring middle and high school students' perspectives remains scarce. However, there has been one study highlighting transgender choral students' perspectives in secondary schools. The deeply gendered traditions and policies of choral music programs are illuminated in 3 transgender high school choir students' ethnographic narratives. One suggestion from this cross-case study is that music educators, quote, should not assume that students' voices and gender identities are linked. Participants' reflections illustrated how heteronormative policies can extend beyond the choral program and are often a matter of school-wide and even district and state-level influence. Much effort has been put into generating information concerning transgender issues in the area of choral pedagogy. Teachers' significance as mentors, asking for and acknowledging students' pronouns, and implementing performance attire policies that are either gender neutral or more fluidly interpreted are common themes and recommendations. Yeah, so, when I was in college, the standard concert dress that all the ensembles I performed in was the men wore tuxedos, the women wore concert gowns, black concert gowns. Now, there was some leeway. The women did not have to wear dresses. They could wear black slacks with a black blouse. But it's interesting that these heteronormative ideas are just woven into so many things that we do. Where was I? Right here, I think. Further suggestions for developing inclusive and welcoming environments in choral ensembles included ensemble structures, policy, and language. Issues of ensemble structures include ensemble names such as women's choir or men's choir, confining gender-variant musicians. Additionally, the physical way a director might arrange an ensemble to stand during performance can be an uncomfortable issue for transgender performers who are expected to stand with a particular section based on their gender or voice type, especially when they do not match traditional expectations. Understanding the transgender voice is a subject that expands beyond the conventional vocal pedagogy and physiology taught in most music education degree programs. These crucial issues are addressed thoroughly in Chiari's case study of the Transgender Singing Voice Conference 2017. Finally, choral music directors should be aware of gendered policies and language that may marginalize transgender and genderqueer vocalists. Setting an expectation that all ensemble members refer to voice parts rather than gender, for example, is how policy and a common language can cultivate a more welcoming and inclusive space for all musicians. So instead of ladies, sopranos, or altos, sopranos and altos. That's something I was taught to do. I don't know if that's why. Yeah, it's interesting. Additionally, additional considerations may include rooming and hotel policies for overnight travel and gender-neutral or flexible performance attire options, as mentioned earlier. Okay, the music classroom and curricula. In one of the earliest articles concerning sexual orientation and music education, Bergonzi discussed the privileges of heterosexual music students and teachers in the music classroom and how the curriculum is constructed and presented. This might be the article that I was referencing earlier. In his groundbreaking article, Bergonzi wrote how, quote, historically we have been fairly willing to examine and transform what we do in order to meet the changing needs of the students who walk through our classroom, and recommended that we seize the opportunity to examine how music educators might improve the experiences of homosexual students in their music classrooms. Bergonzi asserted and pointed to how the educational experience was not the same and was vastly inequitable for sexual orientation minorities. Although most of the data were dated, similar statistics on how LGBTQ+ students feel unsafe or uncomfortable at school were found in the 2019 National School Climate Survey. Yeah, I'm pretty sure the 2014 Bergonzi is definitely the article that I was referencing earlier. It's a very, very powerful read. Bergonzi, 2014, wrote specifically about how the former National Standard Number 9, Understanding Music in Relation to History and Culture, favored the heteronormative culture, citing specific instances where the heterocentric examples were more favorable than certain homosexual realities. Yep, I remember this. The heteronormative bias is illustrated in examples that dissect components of the 1994 National Standards and provide a heterosexual norm and a homosexual dilemma for each. As the author posits, considerations of a composer's romantic feelings or relationships often serve as relatable inspiration for students who, when discussing how romantic feelings towards the opposite sex, serve as stimulation for creating and performing musical works. Bergonzi insinuated a resistance in acknowledging historical LGBTQ+ matters by citing the less commonly taught love interests and ordeals of queer musicians and composers, such as Benjamin Britten, Aaron Copland, Leonard Bernstein, Stephen Sondheim, and Tchaikovsky. I'm pretty sure it's Peter. I'm pretty sure it's Peter. I don't know. Tchaikovsky. Several of the findings of the studies presented in this review echoed Bergonzi's attitude toward the more engaging curriculum for LGBTQ+ students. In their investigation of secondary choral classrooms as safe spaces for LGBTQ+ students, Polke and Caldwell surveyed 1,123 college students who identified as LGBTQ+. Respondents reflected on their Respondents reflected on their middle and high school choir experiences and provided data that revealed a majority of participants considered their high school choral classrooms as safe and inclusive spaces. Themes reflected in the data included transgender issues and the navigation of gender identity, importance of helpful and hurtful vernacular, supportive policies, and inclusive curriculum. Several respondents expressed that choral educators should mention the gender sexual diversity of composers being studied in class. One respondent wrote, "When a piece by a queer composer is done, or if the text is written by someone queer, mention it. Show queer youth that yes, this beautiful work was written by someone who is queer. Allow their dreams to be as infinite and indestructible as non-queer kids." M.L. Garrett also advocated for a better understanding of LGBTQ+ issues by sharing brief oral histories of gay and lesbian teachers and students, in addition to his personal reflection as a gay music educator. Through synthesis and transfer, Garrett also recommended models of inclusive curriculum implementation by synthesizing previous studies in music education concerning general inclusion in the music classroom, i.e., students with disabilities and issues of multiculturalism. Discussions and implications for music educators. Sexual orientation and gender identities are essential components of an individual's personhood and identity development, strongly influenced by significant experiences in the arts. Most of the LGBTQ+ studies in music education have focused on risk factors and disparities in educational experiences. I addressed these factors and revealed substantial concerns for awareness, inclusion, equality, and the safety and support of students and teachers who do not conform to the heteronormative culture that prevails in school communities. According to the 2019 National School Climate Survey, almost all of the LGBTQ+ students, 98.5%, reported hearing anti-LGBTQ remarks in school. 56.6% of these respondents reported hearing homophobic comments from faculty or other school staff. And 71.0% of these students reported hearing negative remarks concerning gender expression from school faculty and staff. Wow. That, as someone who works in a school, that's really upsetting. Therefore, it should not be surprising that 59.5% of LGBTQ+ students reported feeling unsafe at school because of their sexual orientation, 44.6% because of their gender expression, and that 70.5% of these marginalized students avoided extracurricular activities because they felt unsafe or uncomfortable. These data are critical for music educators to consider because music classes are mostly optional, and if students feel unsafe or uncomfortable, they will likely leave. It was also noteworthy that the 2013 National School Climate Survey 2013? Revealed that 47.9% of the LGBTQ+ respondents were enrolled in their school bands, choirs, and orchestras. These data highlight a need for pre-service teacher preparation programs and designers of in-service professional development opportunities to better enable music educators to serve and support the queer students in their classroom communities. It is important to acknowledge that despite the concerning data presented previously, research findings have indicated that school environments are improving. Okay, well that's good. Readers should understand that the selected literature presented throughout this review was not selected to provide a generally negative depiction of LGBTQ+ experiences. In their attitudinal study, Silvera and Goff measured music teachers' attitudes toward transgender students and school policies that support them. Results indicated generally positive attitudes. Likewise, findings from other studies have portrayed educational environments as welcoming and supportive spaces for LGBTQ+ students. In a survey examining inclusive strategies of music educators, many participants expressed positive attitudes towards LGBTQ+ students in their classrooms by responding favorably, yes, I do this, to items describing deterrence of homophobic or transphobic remarks, 98.3%. Conversely, a similarly high number of participants reported negatively, no, I do not do this, to items describing the inclusion of LGBTQ+ topics in the curriculum, 87.3%. Additional efforts are required in determining what an LGBTQ+ inclusive curriculum should include and how to implement it in music classrooms and ensembles adequately. The challenges faced by sexual orientation and gender identity minorities are critical and unique to the LGBTQ+ community. Several of the findings included in this review indicate a lack of preparation for most educators to adequately respond to issues of sexual orientation and gender variant students. Similarly, young and aspiring LGBTQ+ music educators are unsure how to navigate their professional and personal identities. In an area that should be addressed more fully is pre-service music teacher education preparation in regard to LGBTQ+ issues. Like students from diverse cultural backgrounds and students with special educational needs, queer students also require understanding and consideration. Music teacher preparation could be enhanced by incorporating LGBTQ+ topics in curricular conversations relating to multiculturalism in music education. Acknowledging the LGBTQ+ community as a minority group present in music classrooms with their own cultural, social, and emotional needs will better prepare music educators to engage with these students successfully in enriching and meaningful ways. Pre-service music preparation programs also are responsible for preparing future LGBTQ+ music educators to navigate personal and professional identities, issues of equal employment opportunities, and methods of dealing with potential injustices and discrimination. Inclusion of these topics in introductory courses, philosophy and history classes, and student teaching seminars would be appropriate pathways for this critical discourse. Conclusions and suggestions for moving forward. This review of literature revealed a shortage of studies that addressed the middle and high school experiences of LGBTQ+ students. This lack of scholarship is quite possibly due in some aspects to the complexities of involving child participants in human subjects research. Securing institutional review board approval and support for this type of research is one obstacle researchers must overcome, but then acquiring exemplar participants and parental permission are additional difficulties. The prospect of potential collaboration with Jolson to produce more work in this area is a promising avenue that researchers should explore. It can also be difficult to recruit LGBTQ+ participants because of their invisible or hidden presence in society. A possible recruiting solution that might involve a more active and visible presentation at state music educators associations. Connecting with all state honors ensembles and providing sessions for LGBTQ+ music students at state conferences might be one way to connect with LGBTQ+ music students interested in participating in future inquiries. Several items featured in this review involve studies examining the experiences of college-aged LGBTQ+ music students. Although these research strategies could be reformatted for middle school and high school students, areas of inclusion, resilience, support, and identity formation should be the focus of future investigations. Notably, there is a specific need for increased scholarship concerning gender identity and gender variant minorities. Advances have been made in the area of scholarly publications concerning LGBTQ+ persons in music education. It is necessary for music educators and researchers to continue this progress by contributing to the lack of master's theses and dissertations that were found in this review. Professional discourse should also continue to expand beyond the scope of peer-reviewed and practitioner journals. Music education scholars should seek opportunities in specialized handbooks such as Marginalized Voices in Music Education, the Oxford Handbook of Social Justice in Music Education, as well as books like Queer Freedom, Music Identity and Spirituality. Oh, I know her. This important scholarly work should be encouraged, nurtured, and supported by scholars and teacher educators at the graduate level in music communities and institutions. Music educators who also identify as members of the LGBTQ+ community have important responsibilities as role models and mentors. Being comfortable enough to do this can be challenging to navigate, and it is of the utmost importance that a professional and ethical relationship with students is never compromised. The literature presented in this current review illustrates a common pressure that many LGBTQ+ educators feel about negotiating their sexual orientation or gender identity in the workplace. However, it is essential to remember that sharing sexual and gender identities with another is not an immoral act, and that the well-being of music teacher personhood and the personhoods of minority students are healthier when fully embraced. For educators who do not identify as LGBTQ+, their influence on students is equally significant. Engaging with students, families, and colleagues as an open ally who acknowledges LGBTQ+ students and their diverse needs is crucial. The impact on students' lives reaches beyond the music being made together. It contributes to their overall development. My primary purpose in writing this literature review was to raise awareness of an invisible minority go. Nope. I feel like this one was a problem too. Can't remember. We'll see. Nope, sounds good. Okay. No, I skipped this one. An invisible minority in the charge of music educators everywhere, a minority whose educational experiences tend to be compromised by bullying and victimization of the verbal and physical harassment that exists in the schools. Increased awareness of LGBTQ+ students' unique challenges will allow educators to ease some of the turmoil created in schools. With thoughtfully implemented classroom policies and increased mindfulness surrounding biased and gendered language, music educators can take the first steps in creating more enriching, meaningful, and equitable educational experiences. Future research should explore classroom cultures to investigate precisely how inclusive and welcoming music communities are compared with the larger school community as perceived by the LGBTQ+ student body. This type of work would illuminate our progress as well as produce implications for continued improvements. Well, here we have our references. That is going to be all I have for you today. I'm getting hungry. I'm ready for my din-din. So thanks for joining me today. Hopefully we'll come back tomorrow with some more. Let's see, what are we going to read tomorrow? Let me take a look at what's next on my list here. Next is going to be this one, understanding participation in secondary music classes. So researchers have found that secondary music participation is influenced by many structural, interpersonal, and intrapersonal factors. Therefore, music teachers may formulate recruiting and retention strategies around the most influential factors at their school. Structural barriers to music participation might be lessened by easing requirements to enter a music class and reducing conflict between other music classes and activities. Motivational and culturally responsive practices may facilitate alignment between school music classes and student values, attitudes, and identities. And active recruiting strategies may include music experiences, parent outreach, and alternative music classes may nurture positive music ability beliefs and positive attitudes toward the school music program. So if all goes well and nothing out of the ordinary happens tomorrow, that will be our plan for our reading tomorrow. So hopefully you enjoyed the stream. Hopefully you learned something. I got a lot out of that literature review. I was happy to read that. So again, thanks for joining me, and hopefully see you tomorrow.